Today we are talking about marketing automation going from zero to global in 90 days. And today's speaker, Darrell Cypress, he's the company Senior Vice President of Strategy. So Darrell, you've got it. Take it away.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks everyone for joining the call today. This is a great topic. I get this question a lot related to marketing automation and how to go faster and how to go global in a shorter period of time. There's typically a lot of reasons why that happens. One, there's competition, there's a competitive advantage that you want to achieve. There's new ad placements that need to go out or new products that need to be launched. And ultimately, it's just basically, how do I do more with less? I have less ad budgets, my marketing budget is shrinking. There's a lot of pressure from sales and marketing and from the CEO to launch our email campaign, our ad campaign faster. And so it's a very common question. And with the maturity of this market, there's no reason that it would take a significant amount of time to go global. So I will walk through the presentation today. I think we're going to hold questions to the end, but looking forward to having a great discussion today. So we're going to walk through basically three areas where you can either shave time on getting live and going global or increase your efficiency by doing just a few things that I think would make sense. One, we're going to talk about blueprinting, and if you notice that this one is sort of 0 to 45 days, the reason that is because the more planning you do up front, the easier these things are on the back end. A lot of companies like to go directly into, let me just put a campaign into my marketing automation tool, do a little bit of testing, and I'm ready to go live. And those are typically fraught with errors and disaster. Because things haven't been tested and there hasn't been a proper plan, the campaigns don't align with the global strategy or the regional strategy, and there just hasn't been enough connecting the dots between am I ready to launch the campaign with all the pieces that are required to build the campaign. After going to blueprinting, we'll go into design and develop and test. Pretty straightforward, but very important that these steps are met going forward. And then we'll have a discussion around local to global expansion. So a couple of models that we'll walk through to figure out, if you're ready to go global, or should you really just start on a local basis based on a few ideas that we've done with other clients. Okay, why does marketing need to transform? So, the objectives of marketing, are really to drive customers to your business, to your product, to your service. So basically, can you recognize customers? Do you know how to reach them? Are they meaningful and timely? Sarah's a millennial. She's single. Lisa's a married Gen X mom. William's a baby boomer. So do you know the right audience? Do you have the right preferences? How do you reach them? Are you using the right channels? Social media, social, web, mobile, offline. And then finally, are the offers meaningful and timely? So do you have the right messaging? Are you trying to acquire customers? Are you trying to retain them? Are you trying to generate more revenue from conversions? You want to refer them to other product lines? So those are the key areas that are very important as we start the planning and the blueprinting process. Digital is a game changer. So the reason you're probably launching that campaign is because everyone is talking about digital in your company. They're talking about, okay, well, we know we have email, but can we also use our email automation to push content to web? Can we push content to a social channel? Can we use our marketing automation to go offline? There's a connecting point between your marketing automation tool and a lot of these other channels, and so that's pretty critical. So your consumers, are transforming how they buy. There's awareness, There's transparency on quality and price. There's a growing influence of customer opinion. So everyone's an expert in everything now because of the internet and all of the things you can Google to find out information. And people want access to new channels and models. So there's a new sort of multifaceted buying journey. Your customers, so digital is enabling your customers to transform how they shop. Your marketing automation tool will probably be used for targeting promotions and offerings. Are you running nurturing campaigns? Is it to ultimately prime the top of the funnel or really nurture people throughout the funnel? So those are really key areas that we have to pay attention to as we do our blueprinting and planning. We understand our connectivity across our touch points. Are we giving users sort of the same touch points across multiple channels? And ultimately, what is a personalized experience across channels? It's an integrated ecosystem because people can shop in multiple ways. That email that's generated from your marketing automation tool may come into their email as a buy one, get one free offer. They click on that, it's going to take them back to a microsite or landing page somewhere. That experience probably should be replicated also on mobile and also on Facebook or Twitter. So, having an integrated ecosystem is key. And digital is also enabling your competitors to transform how they compete. So I'm pretty sure everyone on this call probably has a marketing automation tool, but it's probably a high percentage of folks who may not be getting the value out of that tool just because there's been so much emphasis on getting things to market quicker and less about understanding the journey that the customer is taking along the way. And both can happen and still be global in 90 days. So it's really about being focused along the way. And again, from your competitive standpoint, if you think you need to do it, your competitors probably are already doing it in terms of planning and getting global, moving into new markets, and really harnessing the power of marketing automation. So it's typically a fragmented story of why there are problems in getting global or why you're even doing this project in the first place. And remember, 0 to global in 90 days can also mean that you already have a tool. It's not that you're starting from scratch, but you have a tool and now you're trying to launch into new markets. You're trying to launch into new regions. And ultimately, there's a 5-step process that you have to really take the time to understand. So you've got, you are the client and you have customers. So there's always fragments somewhere. So let's talk, first is the attract piece, product silos result in incomplete understanding of customers. So do I really know who I'm targeting? Do I really know who my customers are? Have I really done the right segmentation because my data exists in so many different areas? Do I really know who I'm trying to attract? Then once I figure that piece out, I need to engage them. Blind spots between channels lead to inconsistent communications between customers and consumers. So blind spots between channels are pretty much will tell people you have a disconnected digital experience. So as you're trying to go global, it's not just about setting up marketing automation, it's also about understanding how the other channels are going to react or integrate with what you're doing, especially if email is the start of the channel. And typically that is the first channel most people tackle with marketing automation. So once we've engaged people, then we need to nurture them. So we need to get them down the funnel. We need to get them from just high-level interest and prospects into more of an engaged conversation, and from that engaged conversation, we need to get people to start figuring out how they're going to buy. So another blind spot or another problem can be multiple systems and databases create confusion and inconsistent messaging. So for those of you who have Salesforce and you have a marketing database and you have maybe Hadoop or a big data store, there's a lot of data that may be within your ecosystem that may cause confusion. But also in this presentation, what will be key is that even after you go live in 30 days, your data still may not be where you need it to be. But data should not hold you from going live, and I'll explain that later. Fourth is convert. So lack of seamless integration across marketing and sales. That's always a problem. I probably hear it as one of my number one questions: how can I be more efficient across marketing and sales? How can I really understand my attribution across channels, and understanding that the dollars that are expected out of my marketing team are really being understood over on the sales team. So when they make a sale, it can be attributed back to a campaign that I led. And then the retain. So lack of customer insights, personalized support leading to attrition. So at the end of the day, this model is pretty important. And this is a very high-level model, but you can break each one of these down into components, and as you're going live and building out your campaign as part of the first 45 days, each one of these should come into the discussion as a sounding board in your meetings to say, have we tackled each of these areas before we move out of blueprinting and go into a build phase? It's complicated. There's a lot of moving parts out there within your tech stack. Marketing automation is one of many. Third-party data, DMPs, content management, paid media, organic media, social, return on investment, mobility. There's just a lot around implementing a marketing automation package and going live in 90 days, going global in 90. So it's not just standing the tool up, it's also understanding how that tool fits in your environment. You wouldn't tackle all of these at one time, but what you would do is put it on a roadmap and then figure out which one would be first, second, and third in support of at least marketing automation. And a little bit later I'll show you, at least in our experience, which areas we think people should tackle first as it comes to marketing automation. Customer pain points. Well, there are many reasons why it takes customers so long to get their projects off the ground. The executive sponsor is not aligned, or they are aligned and they become unaligned. Data problems bigger than we thought. So data is always a major issue. Again, as I said earlier, data will continue to be a problem after you go live. So fixing all of the data at the beginning would prevent you from going live in marketing automation or any of your tech stack, frankly. Disparate data in multiple systems. As companies grow, so does data. It could just be through organic growth, or it could be through M&A activity. So when you're bringing on multiple companies, different systems, just combining 3 or 4 Salesforce systems or 3 or 4 data warehouses is not a simple task. In the end of the day, a lot of companies will just stand up another warehouse so they can have the data they need to support their marketing efforts. But at the end of the day, that's going to have to be addressed. But again, in this presentation, we'll talk about how do we sort of work around those problems. Integrating with cloud and non-cloud systems. So most of the marketing automation packages today are cloud-based, but a lot of data and a lot of other systems within the organization may be non-cloud based. So understanding that piece is going to be very critical. Key employees leave the project or company and on a realistic timeline. So hopefully 90 days is a realistic timeline for everyone on this call, but unrealistic timelines are always doomed projects. So we'll talk about how we can sort of alleviate those problems. Okay, so you've got your budget, you've got stakeholder approval. Now what? What do we do? Okay, so let's talk about that first 45 days. So at the end of the day, you have to have a methodology that will support what you want to do. And so we're going to take this and say the first thing we're going to do is really just blueprint this and map this out. And blueprinting is an industry term, but specifically with how, in an organization, we'll need to sit back and really assess where you are, your current state, to help us figure out the future state. We really need to look at the architecture, because as much as we want to believe that all of these cloud systems can stand alone, they cannot. There is a fair amount of integration that comes with any marketing automation system, and that has to be taken into account as we implement these products. If you don't know the technology you're implementing, there may need to be a technology assessment to look at other products. But if you already have one, or you're trying to upgrade one of the same vendor, then maybe that's not an option you need to perform. After you're leaving blueprinting, you'll go into more of a design phase, look at some other phases along the way that will help us end up in a strong deployment and going global. So we'll focus on the blueprinting for the first part of this presentation. So from a blueprinting standpoint, we recommend 5 basic areas that we would need to focus on. First of all, and we'll talk about these in detail, we recommend looking at your marketing capabilities and doing a maturity model. I'll explain those later, but those don't have to be 12-week projects. They can be done fairly quickly as long as the right staff is on board. But they add so much value, and everything that happens in that marketing capability map and maturity model can be used as sort of a walking around document for executives. And that'll really help you continue to have great executive leadership on the project. Second is solution definition. So being able to really map out the tech stack, whether it's MarTech or AdTech, regardless, it doesn't make a difference. But understanding your technical solution is key. 3, organization assessment. So being able to understand the organization and who are the people on your project as you're rolling out this marketing automation piece, but also do you have the right staff to support it after you roll out the marketing automation project. 4th is a vendor assessment. We talked about that a little bit earlier. So if you're going with an Eloqua or Marketo, or you don't know if you're going to go with an Eloqua or Marketo or Adobe Campaign or any of the exact target, any of the, whether it's B2B or B2C, it's worth doing a vendor assessment. Again, vendor assessments don't have to be very long, but doing them right will obviously strengthen your position within the organization because someone's ultimately going to ask, did you do a vendor assessment, and why are we using this product? And then 5th, a roadmap and budgets. So being able to have that in place is key. Blueprinting, marketing capability map alignment is the first piece I mentioned earlier. So this is, I know it feels very consulting, but in this model, basically you want to look at the 30 or 40 capabilities across your marketing ecosystem. High-level buckets across the top: campaign management, lead management, marketing resource management, media management, optimization, content, analytics, and customer experience are the typical ones. And then you'd want to dive into the boxes below. Now, this is a critical piece of the marketing automation piece and going live quickly, because once you do this piece, it really helps set the framework for the entire project. In the middle, you'll have adjacencies. So these are the groups that may not be directly related to marketing, but they have a stake in the game. Product and pricing folks, IT, governance, call center, maybe marketing. You have an internal marketing communications group. Maybe there's a research group. You always have to take into account adjacencies because those people are probably sitting in meetings with you as you roll this project out. And then at the end of the day, it's all about really just color coding and really making sure you understand first, second, and third. So the darker colors represent immediate needs. So I'm going to focus on marketing automation. These are the immediate needs. Second, lighter color, these are secondary needs. So maybe 6 months from now, we'll tackle these. And then the boxes that are not shaded, could be just wish list items or items that could be taken up next year. And at the end of the day, maybe you're going to come up with a bunch of initiatives. So data management platform, CRM, marketing automation at the bottom, but for this particular client, the order ended up being this. After you do that, we wanted you to take a look at doing a maturity model. Now again, maturity models don't have to take a long time to do. Maturity models are pretty straightforward. They come in different sizes. Some companies will take 12 weeks to really analyze the maturity. I think this is probably less than a week, a couple-day exercise. Understanding of where you want to be. And the way this works is, I'll click next. I think I have an automation here. So with this color that we have on the screen, this particular client rated themselves as 1 on media and insights, so they're kind of aware. Analytics more in the develop stage. Data more in the aware. Data was just kind of a mess all over the place. Media integration was a 1. Campaigns, they thought they were in a develop stage for campaigns. And then organization. Then, inviting the right people to the room and having these discussions. We'll click through, and then we'll talk about where they want to go. So sort of the reddish color was kind of where they are, and the greenish color kind of where they want to go. So this particular client wanted to take baby steps, so let's get to a 1-stage increase on insights, 1 on analytics. They knew data was a disaster, and so they knew they couldn't get more than 1 step on that. They wanted to jump on media insights, on campaigns. They wanted to jump to a 4 because they really wanted to maximize the investment in their marketing automation tool. And then they thought they could move fairly swiftly in getting organizational alignment. So good in practice, but in my next automation, it gaps cost money. So the larger the leap between a stage 1 to another stage, or from current state to future state, the larger the investment. But this again is another walking around document to help sell anything within your organization, especially to key stakeholders who don't have time to be heavily invested in your project. Campaign journey workshops, always skipped, always a bad idea to do that. You have to have design workshops. They allow you to connect the journey of your customers to where you want, to where your requirements are. So we always recommend 1 week per campaign. I know that sounds a lot for some people, but if you really think about it, you probably spend a week or more just getting a campaign out. So why not spend the extra time to understand the journey touch points, understand the user flows, and then map those to requirements. Because ultimately you find things that become gaps. You find that you don't have the data to run the campaign. We had a company that was ready to launch campaigns, but the data was coming from a product, a SaaS product that they had in-house. The SaaS product data was not interfaced with their marketing warehouse. So the data didn't exist in the marketing warehouse, and the warehouse which fed the marketing automation tool didn't have the data. So these user flows would have helped them understand that the data that they needed to do a decision within the campaign didn't exist. Second, content is also critical. If you don't have the content, there's just no reason to launch the campaign. So when you do these journeys, you start to find out that either the content is dated, doesn't exist, or just doesn't fit the campaign, and that's something that you usually find out. Better to find out all these things earlier than later. Again, as we said earlier, marketing automation doesn't stand on its own. As much as every vendor would want you to believe that the products do not need IT to be implemented, that you can just throw a couple of scripts on a website and gather the right analytics, that is a myth. Every marketing automation package has always a fair amount of integrations to something else. And in this particular model, in this particular client, there were over 15 integration points, not all in phase one, but potential points either in and out of marketing automation. So in order to go global, we're going to recommend really just sticking to the basics. So email, let's pick a channel. If you want to pick 2, that's fine, but let's just get this thing out fast and get it out successfully and efficiently. 2, there's always some integration to a sales product. It could be Oracle Sales, it could be Salesforce, it could be some sales package. Primarily, it's typically Salesforce. Then 3, your reporting and analytics are critical. Because once that campaign is live, you're not only going to be getting metrics out of the campaign tool itself, but you're going to be getting metrics out of the organization, and those two things rarely sync up. So, whether or not you're using a tool like ClickView or Tableau, at the end of the day, the data that comes out of your marketing and automation tool is going to have to be aggregated to the data that's sitting in some other data tool within the enterprise for you to have a consistent view, so you can report metrics up to marketing, sales, and C-level leadership. And then have a roadmap, basic roadmap. Nothing excited about this, but if you have one, you'll be in much better shape going into the next phase. Okay, that was blueprinting. So let's go into the next piece, which is let's start the implementation piece. So this sample is a sample of Eloqua for those of you using an Oracle product. The piece we talked about earlier is putting together a blueprinting model and then putting together a campaign playbook is pretty critical. It allows you to map out everything within your ecosystem fairly quickly. And that was done all in the first 45 days. In that 45 days at one client, we were able to map probably between 5 and 6 campaigns because of a fairly complex 30 decision points. A lot of work went into that. So depending on the complexity of your campaigns, you can do more or you can do less. And then once all of that is mapped, then you want to get it into the tool. And regardless if it's, again, Eloqua, Adobe Campaign, Marketo, ExactTarget, Pardot, regardless of the tool, you'll be able to very easily get this into the tool, set it up in the designer, and really move into be able to launch that very quickly. And the reason you do the design early is because a lot of that testing that you're going to have to do next will be captured in the design part. Then after that, you want to make sure you've got the integrations really nailed. And so we talked about that earlier. So putting together a nice little chart that really identifies how you're going to pass this data over to the sales group is pretty critical. So regardless of the tool you're using or the CRM preferences or the CRM tool you're using, you're going to have to build a model so sales can understand what you're passing to them, and then eventually you'll need to build sort of a funnel and understand whether or not to understand where sales will come into, when are marketing qualified leads passed, when are sales accepted leads processed going forward. So setting up this piece is also pretty critical. And then test, test, test. We can't stress that enough. Being able to test efficiently and spend enough time doing it. Again, the last client, we spent a week building each campaign through the playbook and designing them, understanding where the data resided, understanding where the content resided, and then we spent 2 weeks testing each of those campaigns to make sure they were ready to go live to our customers. Another thing that's pretty key after you test or during the testing process, just making sure that you've got the right leadership and you've got the right change management piece in place. And this is something we do a lot in the space. So there's a lot of things that you want to make sure that the right people are connected and the change management is part of your project. Okay, now it's time for the rollout. So we talked about metrics, and as part of your deployment phase, you want to make sure you have a dashboard that's capturing your metrics. Regardless of the marketing automation tool you use, as I stated earlier, there's going to be a variety of metrics that come out of the tool. Open rates, click-through rates, close rates, how long an email's been out, how long has an email been out before it was responded to. Those are meaningful statistics for marketers, but not very meaningful for your CMO. So you're going to have to take that data and figure out a plan to aggregate that data with other data within the ecosystem. Maybe your CMO or VP of marketing wants to see a plan that really maps out that the campaign cost $250,000, or it was budgeted for $250,000. It took me, $175,000 to get the campaign launched. So I do have a savings there. The campaign's been running for 12 to 16 weeks. Sales says they've generated $800,000 based on this campaign on a budget of $250,000. So obviously that's a huge return on investment and a win-win strategy for everyone. The goal is to make sure that you're credited for that campaign that sales is saying that that's been so successful. So sales may say it's been $800,000, or they may say I would have gathered sold those products or services even without the campaign. So regardless of that, you have to have a dashboard that's meaningful. And so regardless of if it's something that's built or you buy a tool off the shelf, you have to spend and make sure you plan to do the integration, because none of these tools are going to work independently. And whether or not you're using Google Analytics for some metrics, you're using a marketing automation tool for some metrics, you have a DMP in-house for other metrics, you have a CRM tool that's also generating metrics. They all are standalone metrics until you aggregate those metrics into one cohesive platform. So at the end of the day, once you are about to launch your campaign, you'll need to revisit your roadmap and you'll need to revisit your cost model. And that's important because it's not as simple as just I've got a campaign to launch. Marketing automation is can be as expensive or inexpensive as the company requires. In this particular client, we were able to do a cost model that not only calculated internal labor, but also calculated software costs, internal labor and external labor, software costs, the number of FTEs, and then kind of aggregating that into an overall total. Now, the reason that's important is because a lot of these projects may be a capital investment, and before you can even move out of that first phase and maybe into a next phase, or even start your project, you need to understand all of your costs. So understanding where labor costs are, where your professional service fees are, you're going to do it in-house, or you're going to ask a systems integrator to help, are all fairly important. At the same time you're trying to roll this out. And this actually helps very nicely because then you can move into the next phase very much prepared to not have any roadblocks into moving to going global. I think one of the key things that clients struggle with as they go global is the model for how they want to roll this out. So we recommend three models. One is a centralized model. So if you're new to this space, then you want to keep all of the processes and the functionalities at headquarters. And you want to release as little out to your other geographies as possible. So all of the center of excellence, the governance, the campaign approval process, all of the leadership would be at headquarters. And that's a great model to also help you really control what's happening in the field. You've all heard of those sort of franchise models when companies start to franchise and quality goes down. Well, in this model, everything is retained at headquarters, and the geographies are able to submit requests for campaigns, but everything happens at headquarters. In the hub and spoke model, you do start to send more of the relationship and more of the responsibility out to the field. In this model, the geographies now may be able to run a campaign at a very limited model, and maybe across maybe one channel or two channels. Still, a lot of the governance, a lot of the approval process is back at headquarters, but there's more of a collaborative process where both headquarters and the geographies can really work together in a single model. And then finally, there's a distributed model, which in this model, the geographies have total control over launching and actually ownership of the campaigns. This is a much more mature model, so it allows folks, if you've got maybe a mature team in Brazil or in Europe or maybe in Australia, and they're very comfortable running their own marketing automation campaigns, the local leadership requires that all the approval happens through them, you can use this model. The headquarters can still be involved with the decision making, but most of that's really been pushed out to the actual geos. We see most clients start with a centralized model. We see some clients start with hub and spoke. We always recommend starting closer to the left, because at the end of the day, it's all about making sure you've got good brand awareness, you've got a consistent message across multiple channels. If you're going out to market with more than one channels, we always recommend more of a centralized approach, because as you start moving content out to past email, into social, webs and microsites, digital, things become much more complicated, especially if you start acquiring a DMP, moving more into a lot of the ad tech space. It's great to go centralized before you start pushing data out to or responsibility out to a decentralized model. I think one of the key areas that we'd want to also focus on is being able to make sure that you've got the right people on the project. So in this particular client, we were able to go live with a bunch of disparate groups that all came together to work in a very nice model. So from the Astadia Digital team, we brought strategy and operations leadership. We have a digital agency based out of New York. We brought that leadership. We have digital content folks and digital marketing folks that we brought into the project. We also had a systems integration group that did a lot of the cloud-based connectors, did all the data, and pretty much probably 70% of the project ends up being integration, so that's really important. You're always going to probably need a team focused on Salesforce, and obviously this was an Eloqua project, so it's always good to have a vendor in the game. And then there may be a need to have professional services coming from a vendor to help support it. So again, it looks daunting, but again, all this done in 90 days and going live. And this actually particular client went live across three continents in 90 days. And that's it.